Hi guys, so I'm trying something different today on the Facebook Live. So we've got the presentation and I'll be talking over the presentation. So hopefully this all works, and you know me with my technical skills, there's always a little bit of hit and miss with me, but as long as we get the information out. Okay, so we've been talking the last couple of weeks about, we've got the new child safe standards coming in, so we're looking at policy updates, policy reviews, those sorts of things, and how we can use this opportunity to further embed practice or to change practice. Or the other thing is, often I go to services and I speak with approved providers and I do a document test first. So I review their policy, I review their philosophy, I review their policies, I review their QIP, and then I go out to the service and then I review their practices. Sometimes what's written in policy and what is in practice is two very different things. Sometimes that's a good thing and sometimes that's not such a good thing. So this is what we're going to be talking about today, is how you can have a look at what is going on in practice, if practice is better than policy and how you review that, or it's the other way around. If your policy is stating something, but the practice isn't quite meeting the policy statement or the procedures, those sorts of things. So this is what we'll be looking at today. All right, so hi, as you all know, I'm Jodie from JPS Advisors. I'm a governance expert recognised in Australia, and I'm the national consultant one of the national consultants for the Road Safety Education Program for Early Learning Associations Australia, and I've also done lots of training and professional development on all ranges, all different topics. I said to somebody the other day, the only thing I don't do really is first aid, but I do a whole range of things. So if you had received yesterday's newsletter, you would have heard that I said today that I'm going to share some tips and strategies for getting educators, children and families engaged in your policy and what that looks like. So there's a whole range of different ways we can do that. All right, educators, I'm going to speak to you first. Now, educators in family daycare, you are very different to educators in centre-based services. There's a lot more responsibility on you. Not only do you run your own business, but also there is responsibility on you because often the families don't see the nominated supervisor, they may not see the coordinator that often. So the engagement is primarily with you and the families. So what can you do to make sure that families are engaged in the service? Well, look, you've got to understand the context of Australian families, and we know that every family does look different. We know that families come with a range of issues from advantage to disadvantage, lower socioeconomics. We have parenting styles, we have cultural styles, we have children with additional needs, where there's a whole range of reasons. We know that families are also more informed around early childhood education and what that looks like. So they are better able to say, well, this is what I want for my child. These are my aspirations for my child. So we know that families do understand the benefits of early childhood and what those early experiences can lead to for lifelong outcomes. So what are your responsibilities? Well, firstly, I say to people all the time, knowledge is power. And it's really around knowing the sector, knowing the outcomes that we are trying to achieve for children, knowing the national quality framework, what that looks like. And I say, if you're just starting out and it is overwhelming, the amount of documentation that it's actually not. But if you find that it is, start with the practice principles in the belonging, being, becoming. And I find that really does underpin everything that we do. So if you haven't read the practice principles yet, page 13 of that will go through those. I can't remember how many there are right now. So that will go through relationships with families, reciprocal relationships with children. It will give you that foundational knowledge of what education and care services should be practicing every day. So part of your responsibility is to know the framework, know the standard, know the benefits, know what early childhood education does provide for children and people moving forward. So a lot of that is in the principles and all the other guiding documentation. So one of your responsibilities is to advocate for early childhood. We know that people who experience early child, like good outcomes in early childhood, are more likely to experience lifelong positive outcomes. And that's been proven by many, many, many longitudinal studies that have gone over time. Like I refer often to the EPI study. I love the EPI study. And just if you know what's going on, then you can advocate for quality experiences in early childhood. And they should be some of the conversations that you're having with families. Talk to them about, well, you know what, if children experience, this kind of learning, then this is what will happen. Children need to learn for themselves. Children need to learn how to take risk. If we help children manage risk, then children are more inclined once they become adolescents to manage risk a little bit better. We know that adolescent behaviour is a period of time for many people where they do take risks. So if we put those foundations in early childhood, we are better off in the long run. So your role is to have those conversations with families around what is quality for early childhood and why. So I always say you also should know a couple of theorists, because they will not only embed your knowledge, but you'll be able to pass knowledge on to families and really help families understand how early childhood development works, how children work, how their brains develop, how their risk management takes over, how choices are made. We want children to make choices. We don't want to be telling children all the time what they should be doing. We want to empower children to make their own choices, so that when it does come time to making a choice, whether it is smacking one of their friends because they wanted that truck, or speaking to one of those friends, or choosing another truck. So we really want to empower children to make choices. And why do we need to do that? So that children, as they grow and as they develop, they do become more resilient. They can look at a situation and weigh that situation up and make appropriate choices for themselves. So we definitely want that. So advocating for early childhood is so important in the role that you have with families and the relationships that you build with families. Supporting families. I hear educators so many times that some of their comments really do display that they don't have a lot of empathy for families. I truly believe that families are doing the best that they can, and not everybody is born with maternal skills, paternal skills. Not everybody is born with the knowledge of early childhood. So that is our role, to support families. And often, we hear families say, no, I don't want my child to sleep any longer. But we know that sleep is really, really important to children's development. So rather than saying, oh, that parent doesn't want that child to sleep and I'm expected to wake that parent up, help that parent understand what is the best choice for their child. So they might be speaking to their friend at the coffee shop and, oh, no, I kept my child awake, and, oh, no, that worked. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. But we need to support parents. So have a range of resources that match what parents are going through. So if you do have a family member that says, I don't want my child to sleep any more than 45 minutes because they're up until 10 o'clock at night, that might be a sleep pattern that's out of sync. They may not need more sleep. In most cases, they need more. They need more sleep. Sorry, they don't need less sleep. They need more sleep. So it's about giving families the information. It's about supporting their understanding. Ultimately, it is their decision. And we are providing a service to families. So we do implement families' decisions as best as we can. But it sometimes is about training families and giving them those supports and resources that they need to make an informed decision, not just their friend's decision that they've been talking to at the coffee shop. So a lot of what we do is educating families, and I always advocate for a parent ed program, and that can look different in every service, that can look different in every family daycare residence, but a parent ed family is around giving that information to families when their child is at a certain age or a certain developmental stage or is displaying certain behaviours. We can share that information with families. We can share it either through newsletters, we can share it through pamphlets, we can share it through referral agencies. There's a number of ways that we can help families and embed some further knowledge in families around early childhood development, and then at least they're making, as I said, some informed decisions around choices for their children. Okay. So advocating for early childhood, and as I said, this is a lot around theorists, and I find that a lot of educators resist going back to theorists once they've done their qualifications. I find that you don't have to read every theory, but look at the key messages that are in theorists. That really does help our practice. I love knowing about theorists, and when I did my studies, we learnt about Piaget's stage of play, and I followed that through. I never learnt about Reggio Emilia when I did my studies way back in the 80s. But I've self-educated. I've read the topics. I've read some information because Reggio programming is very popular and it's great for children. And so I've done a lot of further reading myself. Bronfenbrenner, I love that theory, like that. And if you just look at that diagram of Bronfenbrenner, how we all fit in, like children learn first from their immediate family and then the wider community, right up to government and policy development, and how that has an impact on the child. And it does. You look at the policies the policies that our government sets and how that does have that trickle-down effect to children. So we are in that second circle, we're in their community, so we have a really big impact on children. And that theory about our impact on children and where we sit in their community, it does really embed knowledge in us as practitioners. And it also, if we can share that knowledge with families, it really does help families understand the dynamics of their broader community and their extended family, and where they're taking their child as far as experiences and activities and environments and those sorts of things. So also think about your studies. Were your studies a quality study? Did you get a quality qualification? And even if you did, how can you further those studies? What is it that you can do? And not all studies have to be classrooms. I've done a lot of self-directed learning and a lot of reading over the years, and sometimes it's just around taking the right book to bed. Sometimes it's about watching a small video. There's a whole range of ways that you can direct your own learning to build your knowledge and your skills so that you can impart that to families. As I said, information, know where to access information. And I say all the time, go to quality providers if you are looking for information. We know that there's so much on the internet and everything is at our fingertips these days, but make sure if you are referencing somebody or referring families to somebody, that the information is current, the information comes from a reputable provider, and the information is relative to what the family are looking for or what they need to know. So that is really building up a little bit of a resource folder for you, or a resource library, or some kind of resource that you can have for families. And look, if that sounds overwhelming, that is something that is built over time. So don't let it be overwhelming. You might just get one resource today, another one next week, and off you go. So you really can build a body of resources for the families that are in your services. Okay, children. Now, children with the new child safe standards, one of the new child safe standards is having children, I've lost my words, is the complaints process being accessible to children and what that looks like for children. So there's a number of things, there's a number of ways that we can get children involved in policy. And look, it is your responsibility to teach and inform children about their world, about their rights, about different strategies that they can use. We do it all day, every day. So now we've just got to broaden our thinking and think about, well, how can the children in this group, how can they complain if they want to complain? And, we want to empower children so that they can. A lot of these changes have come about from systematic abuse of children and what happened, and sometimes it was the system that kept children in those abusive situations, like in schools and churches and institutions, those sorts of things. So empowering children and informing children how they can access a complaints process, what would be a legitimate complaint. They might complain about not having fairy bread every day, and we need to help them through that process. That at the end, we want them to learn, well, you can't have fairy bread every day. But if we've got a child that is feeling mistreated, or if they are being mistreated, then we need to have a process for these children to access resources, show them where they can find information, who they need to go to, what that would look like for them, what processes do you have in place in your policy and your practice so that children can do that, and what that looks like for you. It's also about knowing your role and what your job is. You're not raising children, that you're raising your own children potentially, but you're not raising these children. You are an early childhood educator that is there to educate children, provide a safe environment and empower them along the way, making sure that you are working within the National Quality Framework and achieving the 5 learning outcomes for children. Now, also note your documentation. Your documentation is so important, but please don't make your documentation an arduous task where you feel like you've got to sit down for hours at a time and do it. I talk all the time about authentic documentation, and authentic documentation for me is like a small notepad and a pencil, and you just jot things down. You can stick it in a project book or anything like that. You don't need to go back and retype everything and make everything beautiful. It's a way of capturing voices, and then that project book will show your documentation that you've kept on children. And going back over documentation at the end of the month or the week, and if you jot down children's questions, if you jot down their thoughts, or if you jot down their suggestions, as you go back and reflect on that, there's your children's voices, there's the way to empower children. And as I said earlier, we'll go back to teaching and informing children. You can raise questions with children around, if you were to complain, what would you complain about? How would we do that? So it's about putting that into their thinking so that they can go through that process and learn and feel empowered to raise any issues that they have. So making sure you've got all of those together will definitely help you as you go. Okay, families. We know that families can be difficult to engage, and I was one of those families when my child when my child was in care. I had a full-time job, my child was in care, I had the house, I had, a whole range of things. I was studying at the time. So did I get really engaged in the service? I liked to know what was going on. So for me, I found the newsletters really useful. I just knew what was happening. And, if there was anything that I really did need to know, then I was aware of that. But also, and given my work also, I was very attuned to early childhood behaviours, and I was able to deliver a program at home even when my child was here. So we had a lot of early learning in the house. So engaging families, it is dependent on the families. And when we work with families, we know the families that aren't engaged. We know the families that don't want to know. We know the families that want to know more. And we can tell by some families' behaviours that they do need more information, or they are seeking their questions answered. So engaging families, it's an ongoing responsibility for service providers, educators, coordinators to engage families as we go. So it is around knowing your policies and procedures. So when you are speaking and conversing to families, you know what you're saying to families, you know what's in the policy, you can talk the talk, so to speak. So you're always informing families. Try leaving them with a question. So what do you think about do that? Another strategy is you could, as a service, you could choose a policy a month, and that policy a month, although you may circulate it to families for a review, we're reviewing this policy, everybody, please, I've given you 2 weeks notice, please, if there's anything you want in here. We know that a lot of families won't engage in that, but we've provided the opportunity for them. If you have provided that opportunity, say through an email, then that policy of the month should be the discussion with everybody. So if a coordinator has an opportunity to speak with families, the policy of the month is raised. So we're looking at this policy. These are some of the things we practice. What do you think you would like in there? Or how do you feel that this is being embedded? Or is this policy being met? And with educators, you're having those day-to-day interactions with families. So drive that conversation of that policy of the month to see where it is. This is what I do to meet that policy. These are some of the strategies that I have in place. Is there any feedback you would like? Can you see this policy in practice? What would you like to see in practice? So there's a number of ways to do that, and often that is that conversation as you go. So as family daycare educators, and you being the ones that seeing families that day to day, then it really, a lot of it does come down to you to engage families in the operations of the service and engage them in policy so that they are aware. And if you are dealing with an issue with a family, make sure you have the related policy with you so that you can go through that policy with the family and say, look, these are the policy indicators that we have. This is the policy statement. Tell us where this isn't meeting your needs, or I can explain to you more why we do what we do, because this is what the policy is stating. So it's about using those resources to support families to understand we are obligated for a number of reasons under different pieces of legislation. We are obligated under the standards. So there's a range of reasons why we do what we do, including getting children out and about in their community. We do this because. So I often use the story about the because. So if I just say to somebody, close the door, they may not close the door. Close the door, they may not close the door. Close the door, they may not close the door. But if I say, can you please close the door? Because if you don't close the door, then the cat will get out. Then they're more likely to close the door the next time. So I'm backing it up with the why we do what we do. So when you're speaking with families, if you are speaking through policy, it actually gives you more information to work with, and it shares it embeds a shared understanding. So these are the top tips that I can give you. So have some kind of resource library. Now, the service provider may have an extensive resource library, ideally, where educators can access resources or families can access resources, particularly children can access resources. So a resource library that's accumulated over a period of time that is related to common problems, or as a problem arises, get new resources to build that library. Interest, should be interest-based. So when you're speaking with families, if they have an interest in engaging children in sport activities, then get yourself some resources on that, get yourself some local community contacts on that, and keep that resource library alive and present in families' thinking, so that if they are looking for something, they can go to the service as a resource. For family daycare educators, you may have a small or limited resource library. You've got storage issues, obviously, you've got presentation issues. So what does your resource library look like? So it could be more related to the ages that you're providing care for. It could be more related to the particular behaviours that you're dealing with, the particular interests of the children in your care. So although your resource library may be small, you've still got a resource library, and you can say to parents, oh, do you like that resource? There's further resources at the primary office. You can do that. So remember, it is about engagement, which it means it is about relationships. So if you look at quality area 5, it is about building relationships right the way through your service. Okay, so here's some other ways that I can help if you are looking for anything. Go onto the YouTube channel, particularly educators. That's a free resource for educators, and I'm just about to update. I've got 26 videos that Linda and I will be launching next week. So go to the YouTube channel. You'll find lots of resources there. If you've got a question, type it into the channel. I'm sure you'll find something on there that you'll like. I've given a promotional code that expires on the 31st of July 2022. So if you need new policies, there's a 25% discount on those now for you guys that are part of the community. So make sure you use that promotion guide. The new policies have the child safe standards written in them. There's also ongoing support. I come out and do PD for services. So there's a whole range of ways that I can help services review, improve, and embed best practice. So there's just a couple of links for you as you go. That's the code there, the EDUBUS.19A. That is the code that you need to use to get your 25% discount when you go through the checkout. So make sure you use that code, and it will expire on the 31st of July. Okay, everybody. Well, thank you so much for joining me here today. If you've got any questions, there's always going to be links and ways to get in touch. So let me know. You can jump onto the website. Lots of information on the website. Hope to see you soon. Take it easy. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. See you. Bye.